And that is the biggest American flag that I've ever seen in my life. Nachos were not invented yet. They were invented, but I hadn't tasted them. A tax code called 1031 exchange. So just like a farm. So the association is the Asian American Hotel Owners Association. Court reform, some kind of business activities that can sort of help us. We're on the forefront of human trafficking awareness education, what it takes to be an entrepreneur.
Welcome to In the Arena. I'm your host, Mindy McAlindon. Joining me today in the arena is Bharat Patel. He is the past head of AAHOA, which is the Asian American Hoteliers, and I'm going to let you tell him all about it. So, Bharat, welcome to the program.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Well, it's great to have you, and I always like to start at the beginning. You have such a great American story, and I love sharing those stories. So, can you just tell us about your background and how you kind of came to where you are?
Sure. It's always like, where do I start, right? My parents moved to America in the 80s. I was a little child. It was actually June of 1980. And I think my career started, at a young age. My parents, they came to America and they had kind of one or two options, right? And so it was either working on the assembly line, maybe where the Patriot missile battery is being built in near Boston, or my uncle called my dad and said, why don't you come down to Fayetteville, North Carolina, right? No idea about the Army base nearby or anything, but my uncle owned the Betsy Ross Motel. You can Google it. It's in Fayetteville, North Carolina on the original I-95. And that is the biggest American flag that I've ever seen in my life. That was in the courtyard, right?
That's awesome.
Even to this day. And so that's how our entree into the business. We moved on to Kentucky, Corbin, Kentucky, and my father partnered with somebody for a hotel. And then we moved down to Florida. And then I went to high school in Florida and I went to college, University of Florida. And I kind of ran away from entrepreneurship and from the business. I wanted to kind of work for a while. And what I figured out is that, working with family is where I wanted to be. But if I didn't go to college, if I didn't try to pursue some other career like financial services and other things, I never would have come back to the business that I love in hospitality.
Well, let me ask you, so you came here at kind of a young age, but yet you knew you came from India, right? And so you knew you were leaving your home country to come to a new country. Was that difficult? Was it weird to suddenly start embracing America as your country? What was that like as a child?
So, this brings back memories. So we went from India to England. That was a stopover, and then to here, right? So I was in school in England. As soon as my parents told me that we were going to America, like we were moving there permanently, I went to the library and got a book. And it's about America, right? And so when I was flipping through the pages, and my mom, when I was young, she bought me this NYPD, people have cowboy outfits, so I had a cowboy outfit and a cop outfit.
Oh, that's awesome.
And they talked about New York City and pizza. So remember, this is 1980. The pizza, nachos were not invented yet. They were invented, but I hadn't tasted them. Yeah. So pizza and nachos is what I really wanted to, I got a chance to go to a NASA. Cape Canaveral is where we had our first batch of nachos. But I already tried to read up on America about it. I was so excited. And, when I got to the airport, I had these toy guns. They used to have these toy guns that, they confiscated them. So I had my first brush-in with TSA before they were even invented. But so we get to America. I'm a young child, fifth grade. And I was just so excited. I had two younger sisters, and we were just happy to be in a place that, when you're a child, it's the wonderment of it all, right? Statue of Liberty, Boston Commons, like the old buildings and all that. And look, we lived in London for a while, so there's plenty of history and stuff there. But America was like it's like a new history, new empire, new frontier, and so that's what I remember. And you're taking me back like 40 years, so 50.
That's right. It's just so interesting to hear. I just think how challenging to leave your culture and your country behind and come to a new one. And it sounds like your family just really embraced America when they got here and took advantage of the opportunities that were abounding and made just an incredibly successful life for you. And you and your sisters have then also been very successful in your lives as well. So obviously a history of hard work and good work ethic in your family. So tell me about, you got into hoteling and how. Sounds like it came through your family, but when did you really embrace it and decide this is what you wanted to do?
So that would probably be around 2004. So there's a couple of stints. In 1990, my parents had a motel in Daytona Beach, right? Great city. And the motel was on the beach, right? And so I was already, graduated high school, 88. And so I was already looking to see what my next career would be. So I'd help out the motel. And so it was a small motel. right? And so it was a 22, 24 room motel on the beach. And so that was my sort of first stint. And then I moved to Atlanta, the big city, traveled around a few other places. And then in 2004, my dad said, he's thinking about selling the motel. So maybe semi-retirement or full retirement. And he's like, there's other motels for sale. And so there is this thing in the tax code called 1031 exchange.
Mhm.
So just like a farm or other things people use it for, and it's been greatly expanded now. But back then it was a narrow focus. So they call it like kind exchange.
Mhm.
And so me and my dad we bought a economy vehicle, and we put on like 60,000 miles in like 5 or 6 months. Traveled all over the country looking for another motel to buy, and sort of live our American dream, buying a bigger motel. And then we ended up in Sarasota, Florida, with a 82 room motel.
That's very cool. I mean, it is amazing how you've gone from that to being then president of the Hotelier Association. So let's talk about what brought you into Arkansas, how you
Sure.
got involved. Let's talk about the impact of hotels in Arkansas as well, because it's pretty significant. So first, tell us about the association.
So the association is the Asian American Hotel Owners Association. We started in 1989, so it's a little bit over 35 years. And I was proud to represent in 2023 as past chairman, the largest hotel owners association in the world, close to 20,000 members with over 34,000 hotels. Now in Arkansas, which I believe is the highest percentage, the study was done twice, before COVID and after COVID. 747 hotels. That's a little close to almost 90% of all hotels in the state of Arkansas, which, if I'm looking at this correctly, that's about 40,000 impact jobs and direct impact jobs over 26,000. And
Yeah.
that relates to about 1.6 billion in annual wages and salaries. So, what I ended up doing is, I visited Arkansas, and I had a friend, and he ended up being my partner, and we kind of invested in a couple of other different things. And so, Dairy Queen and a hotel. So it just kind of, worked out for us.
Yeah. Well, it is. And I was surprised actually when I spoke with your group a few weeks ago to learn just how many hotels that you have in Arkansas. And so tell me, your organization, how does it benefit the hoteliers? Like, what is the benefit of being part of your organization? Do you lobby for them? What
Right.
kind of, yeah.
So we have a couple of pillars. We have, of course, advocacy, and I'll come back to our professional education and networking, right? And so there's three big pillars. What happens at AAHOA is we have our national convention, and this year we're actually going to be in Philadelphia. We're going to be celebrating the 250th anniversary. It was signed a couple of years ago, and so we're going to be celebrating there. And the previous year was in New Orleans. Before that was in Orlando, and then Los Angeles. So we try to go east, west, central. But you get around 7,000 hotel owners there, and that's our national event. The regional events, like we have one in Little Rock every year in the fall, is us getting together and talking about the issues they face, right? So in advocacy, for example, in the state of Arkansas, there's a couple of challenges, right? And so what the association tries to do is, basically try to help you make money, save money, protect your asset. And one of the items is on advocacy is just having a more business friendly environment. And Arkansas has been that, but there are, like, for example, insurance rates. And it used to be maybe the hotel insurance rates were maybe $200, $300 per unit, so 20, 30 grand for a property, right? But now there's sometimes up to 70, 80, $90,000, and that's only in the course of the last 2, 3 years. And so I understand there are storms, and I have a property in Florida. The Gulf Coast area has been hit the hardest, right? But I don't see a reason why it should be hit that hard in Arkansas. But that's one of the things we advocate for, right? Some sort of tort reform, some kind of business activities that can sort of help us.
Yeah.
And then, of course, we're on the forefront of human trafficking awareness education. We're part of the solution, not part of the problem. But it's great to partner with, the FBI task force, state prosecutors, state troopers, law enforcement, especially in Northwest Arkansas, where we just had a town hall a couple of weeks back.
Yeah, so can we talk about that a little bit more? It is amazing to hear what you're doing as an organization in terms of training your employees to be aware of what's happening, of making sure that you are working with law enforcement in a way that's beneficial. So can you just elaborate a little bit more on maybe the training that you do for your employees? Or because, as you said, and I do want to reiterate, you are being part of the solution. You are trying to make sure that trafficking is not occurring in your hotels to the best of your ability.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, we've been doing this. It's not just last year. We've been doing it for more than a decade, right? But we call it HTAT training. It's an acronym, but it's Human Trafficking Awareness Training.
Hmm.
And what we try to do is it's offered to our membership, right? So with the 20,000, and if you're a member, you have access to our portal. In the portal is the education. Certain states, it's already a requirement, like Florida. It's an annual, certification. But we also encourage all our members to do the entire team, right? And so some people will do all the team together. Some people will break it out and do, housekeepers and front desk separately, engineering, that kind of thing. But it's an option that's available, and we have also lots of other certifications available online. So that's really a strong pillar, is having that professional education available. And like I said, as I was growing up, for my parents, those sort of three things, and faith, family, education. Those are the things that I grew up with, and education is a process that never stops. And I always encourage my kids, just because when you do end up with a college degree, that's just the beginning, of your adult life and learning things.
Yeah. So I had the opportunity to visit a hotel up here that y'all are associated with,
Uh-huh.
and one of the things that I heard from the owners there is that they have employees that have been there for years and years and years,
Yep.
or at least have been within your system for years and years, which is amazing when you think about a service organization or a service industry, rather. It's very
Yep.
uncommon for people to stay in that industry or to stay with someone longer than a year or two.
Right.
What is it that makes the hotels and your hoteliers so attractive to people?
Yeah. I think about this. Look, I've got a housekeeper that's been with me more than 20 years. Her son, um, you know, uh, her son wasn't sure what he wanted to do in life, right? As many know. But I do remember when when he was in high school, there was this one moment where we were talking, and she was really worried, right? And then I said, well, go to the best high school, right? There's options, magnet schools, but you got to apply. So I helped her fill out the application. So he did well in high school. He got a partial scholarship for the local state college, and then he went into accounting, finance. That's what he thought he wanted to do. And then he got in that cubicle, and he's like, no, no, let me at least work part time at the hotel. So I've had two generations. It might be a third generation coming up soon, but at the hotel. And so there are some team members that come for a few months, and they're not acclimated to it, right? The great thing about our industry is there's always a new challenge every day. You're putting a fire out, whether you're the owner, the manager, the front desk. There's always a new challenge. But it's also this consistency and continuity. What I love best about our industry, hospitality, you can start at the beginning, right? And I can tell you stories of like a Cuban refugee immigrant in Key West, and he could hardly speak any English, maybe 5 words, and he's a bellhop, right? You can if you remember them, move the luggage up, help you at the resort, and now he's a general manager,
Wow.
right? So like my parents, because he's a general manager now, he's able to save for retirement and send his kids to college, and that's what his dream was for his family, and same for my family, right? My parents were, I always had this kind of mug with me, and I talk about Yellowstone, but I think the best story I can give about hotel owners and operators, my parents are like land rich, the business, but cash poor,
Yeah.
right? Because you got to constantly reinvest in the business. And
Yeah.
so, every couple of years you got to refinish or refresh the hotel. And so you're constantly reinvesting, and the labor, it's a labor of love at some point. But the reason I say it's a farm, because it's a family business. And I think that's why so many immigrants do so well in the hotel industry, is it's a family operation, right?
Yeah.
So, I started, probably renting rooms when I was 10 or 12, and, officially on the payroll probably when I was 15 or 16. But
Yeah.
back then, minimum wage was $3.35. So,
So it wasn't much. Yeah. Yeah. That is great. Well, and I appreciate what y'all have done for the state of Arkansas, because as you mentioned, it is, I think you said 40,000 jobs. It's over $1 billion in wages. It's pretty significant. The investment that the hoteliers have put into Arkansas. So thank you for that. Let's move on and talk about some other topics, because one of the things that I love about you is amazing is we can literally talk about anything and you just can pontificate on it. It's fantastic. So let's talk about entrepreneurship, because I think that really, to me, that's a little bit of who you are. Is just you are an entrepreneur. You see opportunities. You're willing to take the risks, but they're measured risks. And
yep,
so, kind of talk about your passion for entrepreneurship, and then let's talk about what would you say to someone who's interested in maybe going down that same path.
sure. And so the first talk, and I've given this talk several. I try to go to town hall forums. I remember the Norman Rockwell painting where the person has that little newspaper and he starts
Yeah,
talking, right? So I try to spell this word and say, look, it's great to be an entrepreneur, right? And there's not one single magic formula, but I will tell you this. Look, Ben Franklin, right? We're celebrating 250th anniversary. Farmer's Almanac. He talked about this. Do you have a Protestant work ethic, right? Are you willing to work more than 5 days a week? You may only get paid for the 5 days, right? Are you willing to work more than 40 hours a week? Protestant work savings ethic. Are you willing to save more than 20% of your paycheck, right? And then Yankee ingenuity, right? So I think my old civics tech, book, I still have it. It talks about Yankee ingenuity, and it's like these 2 or 3 pages, and it has all this stuff. But we don't. I don't think we talk about it. Are you willing to do what it takes to get the job done, right? And one of the secret sauces, when you're at a hotel in your industry is, I learned how to change plumbing fixtures, lighting fixtures. I know, even back then, 1980, 81, we had a delivery of like 50 brand new RCA TVs, XL 100s. They were over $900 a piece.
Wow.
So some people didn't show up to help to move it. So me and my dad were taking each TV into each room and sort of doing it, right? So it's a lot of when you got some things you just got to do by yourself. We could have called, but we needed to make sure we could rent the rooms as soon as possible. So guess what? You dig in, your parents help, the family helps, extended family comes over, and it's kind of like the Pennsylvania Dutch, where they build that barn in Elizabeth. So that's that part. The second piece is what it takes to be an entrepreneur. And we've had at our association convention a couple of people from Sharktown. Mr. Wonderful, he made his money in in Canada in software and in America. We've had Damon John. So we've had a couple of people, Rohan. So, but when we talk to them, we agree on this. I'll tell you this much is, not everybody is set up to be an entrepreneur, right? You got to be a self-starter, and maybe that is like a third of the population at max, right? But out of that third, when you become an entrepreneur, realize that, many people's first business venture doesn't go well, right? It's not like, hockey stick growth, right? Even if you think about probably one of the greatest, Steve Jobs, he got fired from Apple, right? He came back, right? So he's had 3 different iterations of being a part of that company. So my advice to them is, if you have that dream, right? And whenever you're not sure what you're doing, I would always just lean back on like faith, family, education. I remember, I think it was Tim Russert on Meet the Press, and his dad would give him advice, and he gave the same advice to his son. God rest his soul. He would say, you may not be the smartest person in the room, but you can outwork the other person. Are you willing to outwork the other person? And then I would say, go into entrepreneurship, right? Come up with a small business. You can start as small as like a hot dog stand, literally, right? In high school, I remember these guys were selling the bootleg tapes. Do you remember what I'm talking about? Right?
Yeah.
So Madonna was big, Bruce Springsteen was big, Prince, George Michael, right? We're talking about the 80s, and they would sell them out of the back of their car, and they'd have, right? And so, or those candies, Nowalators, right? So you buy it for $0.25, but you sell each piece for $0.10. So you don't you do your own books, obviously, right? But you got to start somewhere, right? And look, it's not, like I said, it's not for everyone, but if you're willing to go, not only think outside the box but work outside the box, it's an opportunity. But I will tell you this: on any book you read on entrepreneurship, who are the people around you, right? Are they willing to help you, right? Are they willing to mentor you? And so that's the key. A mentor is not going to come to you. You're going to have to find one. And what's great about America, look, it's life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. For me, with the pursuit of happiness was entrepreneurship. There's SBA, Small Business Administration, and they have offices around the country. Some states like Florida, 11. I think there's 3 in Arkansas, but they actually have mentors. So people who are retired from business are willing to mentor for free you. So it's like big brothers and big sisters for entrepreneurs.
Wow.
So that's a free tag for the SBA administration.
That's fantastic. Now, are there better businesses than others if someone's looking to get into it, or would you say really it's follow your passion? It doesn't matter what the business is, just follow your passion.
When I go to the talks and when I present to people, I always say, like you said, follow your passion. If you follow your passion, you're never working a day in your life. But I will say this: there are a lot of hard days too. It's not easy, right? Like if you're a fan of Yellowstone, the TV show, being a cowboy is not easy. But if you look at the characters, I can't imagine them being anything else but a cowboy, right? And so, same thing for me. I can't imagine anything else but being in entrepreneurship. I've done restaurants, I've done hotels. I've worked in the workplace, and I came back to hotels, right? And initially in high school, spending spring break painting a room or working the front desk is not really, especially in Daytona Beach, is not really what you want to do, right? You want to hang out with your friends, do other things. So it wasn't my first choice, right? But I did realize that it gives me flexibility. It gives me the opportunity to earn, right, and do other hobbies. So my best advice is, find a mentor, do something at a starting level, right? But there's really two kinds of people in my mind that I face when it comes to entrepreneurship. There's the kind you kind of have to push in the water and they learn how to swim, and then there's the other kind that they just, if you push them more, they may not be able to swim, so they put their toe in, right, and they put their foot in, and then they kind of go with that. So either way, I would encourage anyone, and many people, they find out, later in life, right, like after the military career, or after their job career, and in the 50s they start. I feel like there's no perfect age to start in entrepreneurship, but you got to start somewhere, right?
Yeah, but it doesn't have to be a high risk, right? I mean, to start small or to start, just at the beginning, it doesn't
Right.
have to be the high risk venture that we think of when we think of someone being an entrepreneur. It can be something very simple
Right.
that they're just wanting to kind of be their own boss and get some things moving. Is that fair?
Absolutely. Look, in college, Citibank would give a lot of credit cards. Amex, Citibank, Discover just come out.
Yeah,
I got a 60. As long as I paid my credit on time, I got a $6,500 credit limit. I borrowed that money, and
yeah,
so and nobody would really probably advise you at that time. I think it was 18% interest.
yeah.
But
Oh wait, yeah,
yeah, but I was betting on myself. So to your point, you can get into the business world, $1,000.
okay.
I had a friend of mine who works at a hedge fund now. He started out with selling hot dogs in front of Home Depot in Atlanta, right?
Okay.
And so
Yeah,
somebody saw something in him that made him excel more and do more, right?
yeah. And sometimes I think part of entrepreneurship is being a good salesman, right? It's not always necessarily the idea, as we say, you could sell snow to an Eskimo kind of
Right.
thing. If you're a good salesman, I mean, that's part of entrepreneurship because you got to sell your idea. You got to convince people to jump on board with this idea. And it doesn't have to start with a lot of money. We do advise against using money on your credit card, just
Yeah.
full disclosure on that one. But all right, let's talk about a couple
But you
other
learn
things.
your lesson of compounding interest when you borrow money that
Which,
you shouldn't have.
yeah,
Yeah, you know.
that's a tough financial lesson right there.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
You mentioned earlier that you have a just kind of a passion for Ronald Reagan. You want to talk about
Yeah.
that a little bit?
Yeah, yeah. So when I was young, the 1982 World's Fair came to Knoxville, Tennessee.
Yep.
And Oak Ridge is where the nuclear power plant is, the energy plant, right?
Yeah.
And so he came to speak. So my dad, took us somewhere, and it's a huge audience there, right? It's in the convention center. But I felt like I was like this close to him, right? And I remember this back then, everybody in Tennessee was a Democrat. It's not very popular to be a Republican, okay? But my father's friend, and I just call him Uncle, Natu Patel, in his best, I think it was Best Western, he had this big picture of him shaking hands with Ronald Reagan in his brown suit, the signature brown suit that Reagan had, right? Because I remember the photo, and he had it there. So think about it, that time, and look, I'm sure, Reagan was popular in Tennessee, I mean, talk about, 40, he won 49 states, right, in
Right.
84.
Exactly.
Doing it. So what I'm saying is he wore his political beasts not only on his sleeve, his political beliefs, but like right up there, when you walk into the lobby. And so,
Wow.
what I'm saying is that he really believed in it, right? And look,
Yeah.
Arnold Schwarzenegger has talked about this when he first came to America. Other people have, and there's something along the way where you see someone. It's not a matter of being a political hero, but he talked about loving immigrants, right? If you just Google immigrant story and Ronald Reagan, he'll talk about, all kinds of stories about all places in the world. And that the city on the hill really, really hit my heart, and all the things that he says. And basically, like, you're born in America, you too can be president one day, you too can succeed. What do you want? There's so many opportunities here. It's a land of opportunity. So, you know, many people forget that the 100th anniversary of the Statue of Liberty was 1986. So him and
Wow.
Nancy Reagan were in front of the Statue of Liberty, right? And so when
Wow.
I got married in 1988, the first place me and my wife went to visit was the Statue of Liberty.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
So I am excited about America's 250. I have to say, just because, I mean, one, it's America's 250. It's fantastic. We've lasted this long, which is great for a democracy. But I will say, I hope that it reinvigorates people, and that we have more of this optimism that I think we've missed over the last maybe 10 or 20 years. We've really kind of gotten into more, I don't know, polarizing and
Yeah.
frustration and anger. And But America's amazing.
Yeah,
America is amazing, right? And
right.
it is, as you said, the land of opportunity. And I think Reagan was probably one of our last presidents who could really just cast that vision of it is just the shining city on the hill.
Yep.
It truly is. And so I'm hoping as we celebrate this 250 that we'll hear more stories about that and that we'll get this next generation excited. Are you having big plans for the 250 or are
Yeah,
you
yeah. So for the 250, I got the
look
flag.
at you?
We brought the convention to Philadelphia, and
Okay.
so a couple of years back, George Bush, W. Bush, came to speak, and he says, you know what, I'm going to rename you all the American Entrepreneur Association, right? Because there's all these entrepreneurs, and he just kept he was amazed, and so
Yeah.
look, when I travel and look, whether it's Governor Hutchinson or Governor Sanders now, we spoke about all these entrepreneurs in Arkansas, right? And so one family after another family came over, and look, in Philly, I think we're just going to celebrate, like you said, what the American dream is. And look, in America, history's untold. There's that PBS documentary that Ken Burns has done, and there's always going to be somebody. Look, that, whether they take a pot shot at the history of America or this or whatever. Life is complicated. History is complicated, right?
Mhm.
But is there any other place you'd rather be in the world,
Yeah.
right? And so at the end of when I speak to people, I always say this. And look, I've given this talk to like kindergarten kids too, and also adults, right? And I say this: look, if you think America's best days are ahead of us still, and I do, then stay here. If you think the best days of America are behind us, there's a lot of countries in the world you can immigrate to. Trust me, even now, right?
Yeah.
And so if you want to succeed in America, you really got to want to be a part of the process, and you got to want to be here, right? And so be involved, stay involved. And the reason our democracy has survived this long is you need an educated populace, you need an engaged populace, right? So if the electorate's not engaged and they're not, educated, right, good or bad, right? And so look, when it comes to civics education, I'm like, do 2 years of it. Why do 1 year of it, right? Like, you've got to learn what America's about, and you got to learn what other countries are about, right? And I tell people, the best diplomacy America has is having people from around the world visit America,
Yeah.
right? I've run into students from Saudi Arabia, students from Israel, from Poland like post 1990, right? I had the chance to meet Lech Walesa last year. He did a tour in America, right? So he helped liberate Poland, right, from the communist grip, right? He'd broken his arm earlier, and you should see the optimism he has about the future of the world. He's on the
Mm.
tail end of his career. I forget how but he's a Nobel Prize laureate, and all he talks about is, look, I'm a little union guy, right? We did not think that our little operation in Gdansk would do all of this and would help liberate a country, right? I can't believe if look, Mahatma Gandhi was a lawyer, trained lawyer. Nelson Mandela was a trained lawyer. Martin Luther King, Dr. Martin Luther King, right? So all these people it all started small, right? And I remember in my Southern politics class at the University of Florida, the professor saying, they didn't know, like, doing a sit-in, what difference it's going to make, right?
Mhm.
But and recently there's been a lot of events and lots of people talking about all kind of different things. But look, we've got the Bill of Rights, right? And that's not everywhere in the world, right?
Yeah.
There's plenty of look. I visited the Middle East and other places. There are people deathly afraid to speak out or talk about anything. But I've always remind people, if you live in a true democracy, what are if you live in a totalitarian regime, how do you tell the difference? In a totalitarian regime, the citizens are afraid of what? The government.
Mhm.
In a democracy, the government is fearful of its citizens, right?
Sure.
So
Yeah.
we always have an opportunity. So look, I'm the biggest. I think there's a lot of cheerleaders for America, but I'm one of them. And every opportunity we get a chance to vote for who we think can lead the country better the next 4 years. So can't beat
Yeah.
that.
No, it is pretty amazing and it is pretty unique. And, people always talk about Washington being probably the only leader in the history of the world to willfully walk away from power because
Right.
he's like, I'm done, which is, I think, indicative of who we are. And to have peaceful transfers every 4 years, 4 to 8
Right.
years is pretty fantastic, actually. So,
Absolutely, and look, there's a great book by Chertow on George Washington, but he also read the classics and
mhm.
Noble Cincinnatus. He was working on his farm in Italy, and the Senate sent out a request and said we need you to re-enlist. So he came and he beat back the barbarians at the gate, and then he went back to his farm.
Yeah.
Right. And so, the people don't realize a lot of legislators around the country, whether it's Arkansas or other places, they're only in session part-time.
Right.
Right. So it's citizen legislatures. Right. And so it's small government. And that's the key I believe that's the key for today. And that's key for the future is having citizen legislatures, when you do, you're not how do I say this? You're not a full-time politician, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree. We're in session 60 days every other year.
Right.
That's how Arkansas works. I mean,
Right.
so it's, that's not bad.
And if you can't make a difference in 60 days, then what are you doing there, right?
What are you doing? Yeah, yeah. I will say, though, in that 60 days, it's fast and furious. So
Yep.
just so you know, we don't sleep for 60 days. Well, good. Well, let me wrap this up with you. I love our conversation. And I mean, for real, we're going to have to do a part 2 because I think there's about 50 topics we haven't even touched yet that I know you're an expert in. But what I'd love to ask you just to wrap up is, can you give me either an incident or a book or a person who just really shaped your life or had a big impact on kind of your outlook on life? Just kind of a
it's funny. I went to one of the events. They asked Tom Brady this at a Super Bowl, and he got emotional. It's my dad.
That's awesome.
Right? It's not, the Hall of Famer or the multi-billionaire. It's my dad, right? So, it's about family, right? And so the business is important, but I really felt. Sorry, I'm getting emotional. I really felt that he gave the mold of how to be a man and how to be successful in life.
That is amazing. And I will say it is, I think people underestimate the impact of a strong dad or a strong mom for that matter. But
Yeah.
I mean, I had a very strong dad too. And so I think people underestimate the impact that that person has, not just on you, but generationally, when it kind of feeds down. So I think that's a great place to end.
If I may, I met Cole Secretary of State. He was talking about his mom and single mother, and his father died young. Boy Scouts. So I did Boy Scouts for a little bit. I did Police Explorers. But to your point, if you don't have a father, there's, in America, I'm telling you, there's so many opportunities. You have options. You got to just take advantage of it. And look, whether it's you talked about Reagan. Here I'll make a plug for a book. I got this at the Ronald Reagan Library. My escape from the world wasn't this and the TV show. It was reading a few books. You don't have to read tons of books. What are the last 5 or 6 books that you read, right? And where do you want to be in life, and what do you want to do, right? And it's important to kind of write it down in your life. And look, I get in life gets too busy. Sometimes you're not sure. It's hard to do a roadmap. But I would leave with this. Mr. Friedman talked about this, a couple other people. The change in America over the last 15, 20 years, if I may, is you could kind of meander through life and still get ahead in the 80s and the 90s. Something happened in 2000, 2010, where if you want to get ahead in America, and we all do, right, you're going to have a plan, right? And it doesn't mean you have to go to college, right? But you do have to have a plan. You're going to have to, further educate and do things. And the great thing about America is, it takes a village, right? And so for me, we grew up in a small town, Corbin, Kentucky, where the first Kentucky Fried Chicken in the world. It's like, I think 11,000 people, right? South of London, Kentucky, between Lexington and Knoxville. But I loved, I used to watch, Andy Griffith. But wherever you live, even if in an urban center, right? If you have if you just embrace your family and the opportunities America gives, I can't imagine someone who can't get ahead and live his dream out. Yeah. Or her dream. Yeah.
Or her dream. That is a great place to end. Bharat, thank you so much for your time. I really have enjoyed it. And I'll just look forward to having you back soon, for sure.
Thank you. Thank you.
Take care. Well, I hope you've enjoyed our conversation today with Bharat Patel. He is the previous president of AAHOA, which is the Asian American Association of Hotel Owners. And he has just the most fascinating story of how his family came to America, really embraced the opportunities that America has, and has just become a very successful businessman and a very strong family man. So I hope you'll join us again next week in the arena.